Namaste. This is Francie, and welcome back to the Pure Flow Yoga Podcast, a place where we get to go deep with yogis, thought leaders, cultural creatives, and consciousness explorers to spread love, inspire you, and spread the good vibes. I believe that yoga is helping to change the planet, so I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to stay connected, sign up for our love letter at pureflow.yoga and receive our free weekly love and inspirations, as well as be the first to know about our new podcast and blog releases. We'll also share special deals here on our yoga retreats and trainings that we just don't share anywhere else. And if you like this episode and want to keep supporting us to create free, awesome things for you, feel free to support us with a monthly contribution. You can find that at pureflow.yoga/podcast. Your journey to becoming more inspired and connected begins now. Welcome to the Pure Flow Yoga Podcast. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Simone Mackay. With over 2 decades of experience as a yoga practitioner and Yoga Alliance accredited teacher trainer, and supported by a bachelor in social work, Canadian-raised and Switzerland-educated Simone Mackay has dedicated her life to the path of self-inquiry, care, and conscious living while empowering others to do the same. As the co-founder and director of the renowned School of Sacred Arts, also known as SOSA, which was Bali's yoga mecca, Yoga Barn's original 200-hour yoga teacher training, Simone has certified over 600 teachers and inspired thousands of students to find their soul's purpose through yoga teacher trainings, retreats, and events across the globe. Simone spends intensive periods working in ceremony with various plant medicines and yoga practices and deepens her connection with nature through vision quests inspired by Western psychology and Native American traditions. Her new project, Somah Journeys, is grounded in shamanic yoga and nature-based spirituality and brings together a wealth of study and various cultural lenses and wisdom traditions, including ancient tools of yoga, Yoga Nidra, and medicine wheel teachings in synergy with the plant teachers and shamanic practices to help guide people home to their heart space and their soul purpose. Simone, welcome.
Hello.
I'm so happy to have you here. You've been such an inspiration to me on my journey as well. So tell me a little bit about yourself and where you're at in your journey.
Well, it's a really interesting time for me because it's a big transition time. We, in life, often see cycles play themselves out, and I find myself kind of in a stage now where one chapter era seems to be shifting and coming to a close, and a new chapter coming in, and so I kind of find myself sitting in this sort of, in some ways, unknowns, and in many ways seeing where things are headed. And just what you were saying in this bio is very much the direction that I'm headed in, is holding this space more and rooted in nature-based practices. Yoga Nidra is a huge inspiration for me, has informed my whole yoga practice in really profound ways. So
I want to ask you about all of these things, but before we move forward, I just want to take a little step back. So you've been doing these 200-hour teacher trainings for how long, and what's made you decide to move in a new direction?
We've been guiding 200-hour trainings for the past decade.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's been a beautiful journey of guiding people as they step onto this path of teaching yoga or just for their own deeper self-practice. And I just feel like, things evolve. And so I'm moving more in a direction of wanting to hold space for people that takes them a little bit deeper. I've been on the path perhaps for some time. And the 200-hour trainings, the landscape of the yoga world is changing a lot.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot just in the last few years. So the way that people come to 200-hour trainings, the way they find out about it, their interest in it, I see changing. And one of the things that has been challenging is the changing landscape of social media and how you get the word out and how you get people interested, in a sense requires a lot more energy to really master the technology of all of this. And really I'm just a practitioner. I'm a teacher. I enjoy these practices, and I want to spend my energy on the practices and on the teaching. So part of the shifting and letting go of the 200-hour trainings is just really wanting to commit more deeply to the practices themselves.
Beautiful. And that's essentially what yoga is about. It's about going deeper within yourself. And so there's this kind of contradiction, because in some ways, and I'm experiencing this with my own business, I have to be the face. It's about putting more of the superficial aspects in some way of myself through Instagram and to show people this is the experience that you're going to have of going deeper within yourself. So it's a juxtaposition of...
It's so ironic that we're, teaching a practice that is all about letting go of the conditionings and identities. And here we're having to, on some level, play the game of creating image in order to get people interested. So it's a weird game to be playing.
Yeah, and from my perspective, there's really no good or bad. There's space for everyone. And I read a statistic yesterday: for every yoga teacher, there's 2 other yoga teacher trainees, 2 other people studying to be yoga teacher training. So it's a very much growing world. And I think one of the things that we really need as yoga teachers is people like yourself who've been on the path for a long time, who can take us by the hand and guide us a little bit deeper. What's next?
Yeah, and that's what I value about, the teachers I've had, is this kind of sense that somebody's holding the torch and has walked, a little bit a ways ahead, and not necessarily that, we know more than anybody else. I think everybody brings their own life experience to this deepening process.
Totally.
But it's nice to have some kind of guidance and mentorship along the way, and I've appreciated that with the people who have kind of walked ahead of me, and I hope that I can be that for others.
Beautiful. I'd love you to tell me a little bit about this journey that you've been deepening throughout your own practice with Yoga Nidra and these plant medicines. How has that journey been evolving?
Well, it's very much been a personal journey. So I had been practicing yoga for, close to 20 years at this point. But prior to even coming to yoga, I had an interest in holistic health, and I had studied aromatherapy well over 25 years ago. So I always had a bit of a, there was a resonance there and an attraction to the plant kingdom. And then in the last 10 plus years, it kind of naturally, organically came into my life to start working with the entheogenic plant teachers that primarily come out of South America, but they're all over the world, really. But certainly South American indigenous cultures have really cultivated the relationship with plant teachers as wisdom keepers. And so I really, to me, it was just a personal kind of deepening of my own exploration of self and soul. And as I worked with the plants and also had experiences with vision quests and more nature-based spirituality, I started to see the overlapping of just what the yoga practices do as well, and that they're all just essentially lenses that all point to the same thing.
Can I just press pause for a moment? What exactly is a vision quest?
A vision quest is rooted in different cultures have used vision quests as a kind of way of deepening their community members' connection to community by actually removing yourself temporarily from the community and going out into the wilderness and spending time out there, fasting, living among the elements.
Wow.
And that way, kind of, the veils sort of become a bit more transparent between the mundane world and the subtler realms. And it's from that place that vision or guidance or deeper purpose, life purpose, can actually clarify. And as that clarifies, one brings that back to the community to enrich the community. So different traditions, have used this kind of way of working in different ways. Mm-hmm. But and it's, as far as I know, comes about in different indigenous communities across continents. So.
And is this something that, generally speaking, everyone in the community would go through as some kind of initiation, or?
Yeah, I think it depends on the type of community.
Yeah, sure.
I think traditionally indigenous tribes would do it more with their younger people as an initiation into adulthood. Or just stages. It's a form of rite of passage.
Right,
and a rite of passage is just essentially moving from one way of being to another, and that it's marked through a ritual, through a conscious practice where that transition is very made conscious.
I'm curious, would you say that yoga, as a umbrella term for all of these practices, all of these Eastern practices that we've begun adopting and that are very, popular right now, is there an element of rites of passage in yoga?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's coming back to your question around what the meeting point is between the yoga and these different nature-based practices. Is what I started to see was that, especially in the 200-hour teacher trainings where people are going through a month, that there's a very definite kind of phase to the practice of a rite of passage. And I was seeing that people going through teacher trainings were going through that exact same process. So I started introducing that as a context to people's experience in teacher trainings. And it's very much kind of three main phases. One is a letting go phase, where you're surrendering and letting go of whatever doesn't serve you anymore. And you do that consciously, and you can do that through conscious practice, and a lot of the yoga practices do serve as a way of, what do I let go of with intention? How do I, fire ceremonies, mantra, even asana, breath work can all serve for that kind of letting go process. And then once you've created space, there's kind of an empty void, and that becomes the threshold phase of allowing things to surface, and at the same time kind of tilling the soil, of fertilizing the soil for planting new seeds. And so that threshold phase is kind of where the new seeds might be planted. You might not even know what that is or what that means. And then the third phase is a reincorporation phase. And right in that word, reincorporate, incorp is to embody. So how do we embody what new seeds we've planted? How do we live what we've attuned ourselves to? And so that then becomes the gift that you bring back to your community. And to me, all the yoga practices really can assist us doing this in a very conscious way.
Sounds like the hero's journey as well.
Absolutely. It's totally exactly that.
And there's some discomfort along the way, that tilling of the soil phase.
Absolutely. And this is where I've seen with the yoga practices as well as the plant medicine work, is that it really does, it brings to the surface things that have been kind of hidden away in the shadows, whether it's hidden away in our actual tissue of our bodies and our joints and so on, or it's stuck in our emotional realms or mental. It's like there are things that get kind of shuffled off into the dark spaces. And the yoga practices, as well as the plant medicine work, really brings all of that to the surface. And as one of my teachers of Yoga Nidra, Kamini Desai, says, what is coming to go. So whatever is surfacing is actually being released. And that's part of that making space, and with intention, and being able to plant new seeds of
beautiful. The way I understand it is that yoga is really this tool that's available to us on a daily basis to help let go, till the soil, incorporate. Whereas something like these plant medicine teachers, are they more of a peak experience, or how? I'd love to bring a little bit more light to what the plant teachers are, who they're of benefit to, and how it works exactly.
Well, I always say the plant medicine work is not for everybody. I do think that it's one has to feel called to do this kind of work.
What does that mean, feel called?
I think it's like something in your soul and your consciousness goes, kind of perks up when you hear it, even if you don't know what it is. And that there's a sense of like, there's something there for me. I don't know what it is, but there's something there for me. And part of it might be about discerning, is it your mind that gets really excited about like, ooh, there's something new to try? Versus is it something that's kind of coming from a deeper place?
A genuine curiosity.
Yeah, exactly. So that to me is what a calling feels like. And oftentimes I think people feel called to things and they end up in places. I've seen this many times on our yoga trainings. People are there and they're like, oh, I had no idea this is what yoga is about. I thought I was coming for this reason, but I'm realizing I'm here for a much deeper reason, and that is also a calling. But back to your question about the plant work. Plant medicines are, and I think there's different ways that the plant intelligences work with us. And so the ones that I've been working with specifically, and they're increasingly becoming more known in the mainstream, but I've been working with ayahuasca, with Huachuma or San Pedro, and I've been working with some plants that one in the South American traditions one calls dieting. So you work quite intensely for intense times with a particular plant along with other ceremonies, and those plants bring a certain intelligence, and it's like they know what you need, not what you want, but what you need.
Key distinction.
Yeah, and I think one of the similarities that I see with the yoga practices is that this whole notion of samskaras, this notion of that we have a lot of preconditioned, it's like we're informed by our past experiences. And these conditionings, if we're unconscious about them, they kind of just run our life. And the yoga practices bring attention to, in a sense, reprogramming how we can let go of conditioning, and how we can really just live from the moment and live from a place where we're informed from a deeper soul heart place than just our conditioned mind. And yoga looks at this, and meditation looks at this with an enormous amount of insight and depth of understanding how the mind and all the layers of our being operate. And we can, if we practice and study yoga, it can remain kind of in the intellectual realms. I mean, yes, as we can practice yoga, and that will move a lot of energy and move things through our body, but we can kind of bypass certain things.
In the interview I did with Emily Kusser, who I know is someone that you teach with as well, she was talking about a time in her life when she was reading every book you can imagine on restorative yoga rather than actually restoring through restorative yoga.
Yes, exactly. So the practice is definitely really important, but we can kind of get sidelined and sidetracked of like just keeping it intellectual. And I find the work with the plant medicines is there's no bypassing. Like it's, you're in that experience, and we'll often touch on experiences that yoga talks about, the philosophy of yoga, and kind of all the esoteric kind of notions that come with the notions of spirituality. I find that we can actually land that in much more experientially through the work with the plant medicines. So in that way, and then coming back to this idea of conditionings and samskaras, I think that the plant medicine work very much can also go in and clear out a lot of those conditionings.
Helping with the letting go part of the process.
Yeah, yeah, on all levels of our being. And in some ways I found it to be a lot more effective than even the yoga practices. I mean, of course, it depends with what degree of motivation and dedication you are meeting any one of these practices with. I'm not saying that, you know, yoga or meditation is any less than plant medicine work, but for me, I find that the plant medicines have been very powerful in taking my meditation and my yoga practices that much further and deeper.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's been something on a personal level that I've grappled with, because I had some teachers and I've studied with some gurus in India, and they really proclaim that yoga in and of itself is a complete system, and you don't need anything from the outside. You don't need to take a physical substance from outside of you to put it inside of yourself. And then at the same time, we have access to all of these tools that can lead us into more self-awareness, which is ultimately the goal of yoga, as I understand it.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, in a way, it's like, who cares how you get there, right? You know, and we've had these conversations before about, like, the yoga practices and philosophy is, there is evidence that the ancient yogis worked with plant medicines, right? And you know, this may or may not be accepted, but it's definitely part of some of these traditions. And the other piece is that as human beings, we have co-evolved with the plant kingdom. We are in close, you know, interconnected relationship to the planet around us, in particular with the plant world. And we have receptors in our brains that perfectly fit together with the plants, you know, however that works on the level of neuroscience and so on. So, you know, evolutionarily, we have co-evolved together, and you know, we fit together. So why not? I mean, we feed ourselves with plants, right? So why not feed our spiritual journey with the assistance that we can gain from them?
I love that. Yeah, I was really blessed to spend some time studying with Matthew Clark, who's a scholar who shared on a retreat I did in India a few months ago at this stage. And he wrote a book, Somah, Homa, and Ayahuasca, where he identified something like 12 plants in South Asia that can be combined to create the DMT, is it?
Exactly.
The brew.
Yes.
And that this was the secret ceremonies that the Brahmins, this upper caste of yogis in India, were using in their ceremonies. And in the Bhagavad Gita, in all of these texts, in these sacred ancient texts of yoga, they allude to this sacred elixir that was being used by this Brahmin caste. And he basically identified that Somah, which was what's being alluded to, is ayahuasca.
Yeah.
So it's very relevant and very current that this is being unpacked. And again, like you're saying. And so this is your new project is called Somah Journeys.
It is. It's Somah with an H.
Okay.
So so it's a bit of a play on words, and I added the H because it's kind of like a Somah. There's you know, the mother in there. It's kind of a reference to reconnecting with the feminine essence. And so many I find of the work with the plants is this kind of feminine energy. And yeah, there's a number of other reasons why I called it Somah, but it definitely is a way of, you know, acknowledging my connection to the plant world and to the yogic teachings.
It's that bridge.
It's the bridge, exactly. Yeah.
What do you mean when you say feminine energies?
Well, you know, I think we've come out of a time of many thousands of years of there being an inherent imbalance between masculine and feminine, and I I feel like we're coming into a time where there's a need for bringing about more balance. And we see this reflected in the outer world with, the earth not being taken care of. Well, I believe humanity has a role of stewardship, which we are failing at hugely.
Lots of opportunity for growth there.
Right, definitely. So to me, there's a connection there of, how the feminine has been perhaps devalued. And when I say feminine, it's more about an energy. It's within all of us, whether you're a man or a woman. So I really don't see this as a distinction down gender lines. I feel like it's an energy that is inherent in all of us. Some of us may have a predominance of one or the other, but I think that we need to restore our relationship to valuing the feminine and masculine equally, and restoring our understanding of what it means in a healthy balance. Like, what is the healthy masculine? What is the healthy feminine? And that's tricky territory, because I'm sure we all have our own definitions of what that is, and then it gets confused with gender roles and so on, and that's I think where we need to get clear about what it means to restore that balance within ourselves, and then how that restoring a balance within ourselves, how that then ripples out into our relationship to our people in our lives, to the planet itself.
And within the yoga world itself, something that I'm noticing is that all of the yin yoga classes and the restorative and the yoga nidra, these more feminine practices, I mean, in that sense of the feminine essence of receptivity and allowing and slowing down, less doing and more being.
Absolutely.
It's really on the rise. People are so much more interested in this than they were, even just 5 years ago, when it was all about vinyasa and power yoga and hot yoga.
Yes.
So that's a restoring of the balance within the yoga community. And I know that Yoga Nidra is a huge part of your journey, and I'd love you to just tell us, what is Yoga Nidra? What are the benefits? And also, where is the overlap with the plant medicine or the other aspects of the Somah journey?
Yes. So Yoga Nidra is one could call it a sleep-based meditation, and
Sorry about that.
We just got distracted. It's really a unique meditation that guides us through varying states of consciousness, so that we remain conscious through, in neuroscience, it would be looking at the different brainwave states. In the yogic philosophy, it's an exploration as we drop through the koshas, the 5 layers of our being, which include our physical body, our breath and energy body, our mental body, our emotional body, our wisdom body, right through to the very essence of who we are, our kind of soul, blueprint in a sense. So we have very specific kind of methods of how to explore those different layers of our being, these different brain frequencies. And it's a very comprehensive practice. And it's a practice that has tremendous power in the non-doing. And it teaches us many things about, what yoga essentially is teaching us, and bringing questions around, who we are at our essence, and also allowing us to deepen our self-inquiry in very tangible kind of ways, but magically in very non-doing ways. You just basically lie there in shavasana and follow a guided, practice. But once you really understand what the practice is about, it has the potential of unfolding, a lot of magic in one's life, which I've been experiencing, quite profoundly. So I'm really passionate about the practice. It also has a very effective and useful way of integrating healing and integrating. So it's been found to be very useful for trauma work, for addictions, for anxiety and depression, stress in general. So even if you're not interested in the whole spiritual journey, it's very effective in stress reduction. So just from that perspective, it's incredibly useful.
And I think you studied something called I rest, which was sort of a non-woo-woo version of it to make it more accessible to people, right?
Yes. So I have several teachers who are all kind of spearheading the Yoga Nidra movement. And as one of my teachers, Uma Dinsmore Tooley, who's written an incredible book called Yoni Shakti, that's a sidebar, but
we've been recommending that one. Yeah.
But I like how she describes it. There are different tour buses that are kind of the different methods of Yoga Nidra, all these different schools that teach their own kind of approach to Yoga Nidra. They're like a tour bus that go into the landscape of the consciousness of Yoga Nidra. So they all have their own sort of way of exploring this consciousness that is Yoga Nidra. And I Rest was created by Integrative Restoration, was created by Richard Miller, who I studied with for a couple of years ago. And he's a psychologist, so he's been a long time yogi and meditator. And back years ago when yoga was still too woo-woo for most mainstream, he wanted to make it accessible to the layperson. So he kind of took all the woo-woo yoga language out of it and called it I Rest. But it's, and now he's starting to reintroduce some of the yogic terms, and certainly I did his trainings and they're fully rooted in the yogic traditions, and very true and authentic to the yogic teachings. So he was clever, I think, in the way that he just wanted to make it accessible to the mainstream.
And I think also the Western mind, we need some sort of scientific validation sometimes. We want to trust so much in the magical and in the direct experience, but I think it's also comforting somehow to know that this is the brain state you're in and this is the journey of the next brain states. What are the names of the brain states again?
There's alpha, beta, theta, and delta. And then there's gamma in there too.
And so we're operating generally in what brain state?
Right now we're in beta. So we're kind of in the waking state, and we're conscious and aware and awake. And then the moment we close our eyes, we go into alpha, which is kind of an awake place, but rested, kind of more calm. And then as we start to sink into, just before going to sleep, we start to sink into alpha, theta, and then kind of that dream state is theta, and then deep sleep is delta. And the fascinating stuff about this is that the yogis knew this thousands of years ago. It's in the Upanishads. There's 4 states of consciousness that the yogis spoke about, which was waking, sleeping, deep sleep, and then the state of Turiya, or actually it's not even a state, it's source. And this is exactly what we're exploring when we go through the Yoga Nidra.
And just as yoga trivia, those are the states that are embedded in the symbol of Om, right?
Exactly, yes.
Can you tell us about that, the Om? It's so fascinating.
It is. I love this stuff, and I love teaching it and sharing it. So I'm sure everybody knows what the Om symbol looks like, and it's kind of like a backwards 3 with a couple of little loops that come out of that point between the 3. So each part of that 3 is representational of the waking state, the dreaming state, and then the deep sleep state. And then there's a little dot that appears sort of under a little half moon. And that half moon is just kind of like an indication of the veils that keep us from actually understanding our complete connection with Source, that we are Source consciousness, and we are connected to, we are the one life. And the one life is that little dot. Like, you can't even represent it in any form. So the dot itself is just like an indicator of this is source.
I love that.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people who come and practice with us at Pure Flow, they're new to yoga, they're new to meditation, and it's this trying to grasp this concept of what is meditation. I'm sitting here, I'm grappling with the mind. Am I meditating yet? Is this meditation? So is the theta state that you've just referred to, is that the state of meditation, would you say?
Well, I think, I would say that certainly just understanding it from the Yoga Nidra perspective, and Yoga Nidra is a form of meditation, so of course there's overlap in the research that has been done on meditation and, brain states and so on. So my understanding is that certainly the Yoga Nidra state of consciousness that one would call a meditative state happens somewhere between the alpha and delta, so it includes alpha, theta, delta.
Okay.
Delta tends to be kind of the state where one, is out, like that's past, you're not dreaming in that state, but apparently the yogis were cultivating, being able to actually be awake in the state of delta. So their brainwave states are, registering as delta, and yet they're conscious and aware. And they have done tests on some of the, authentic yogis, one of them being Amrit Desai, who I've had the privilege to sit and study with, and his daughter Kamini Desai. Apparently he lives a lot of his life in the delta state, even just in waking life.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd love actually to move on and ask you a little bit more about your inspirations. You've mentioned a number of teachers that you've studied with. Who are you, or what books or what people are you feeling really inspired by these days?
Well, as I just mentioned, I mean, a lot of my yoga studies at the moment are really focused around Yoga Nidra. So the teachers that I've been really inspired by have been Kamini Desai. She has a book out called Yoga Nidra, The Art of Transformational Sleep. And her way of teaching is just so crystal clear and so approachable, and just beautiful teacher and human being. And her father, I've been tuning into a lot of his just online darshans, and he explains a lot about what yoga really is about, and it's really helped me kind of land all the years of studies that I've been doing and practicing yoga. It's like landing it into a much deeper place of understanding. So I've gained a lot of inspiration from them. I've studied with her in person a few times and just spent time with them in India a couple of months ago. And then, as I mentioned, Richard Miller a couple of years ago, and I continue to tune into his work. And I Rest. And he does a lot of, collaborations with research. Like, they're doing a lot of brain research, neuroscience, all of this on the effects of Yoga Nidra. And he's been doing a lot of very successful work with war veterans, people coming from, very difficult life circumstances, lots of trauma and so on, and seeing how this practice has been really helpful to them. Uma Dinsmore Tooley, as I mentioned, is another one of my Yoga Nidra teachers, and I've gained a lot from her. And all three, have very different ways of delivering
different
the Nidra.
School buses.
Different
tour
schools,
buses.
Yes, different tour buses, but all very profound and inspirational. So yeah, I've kind of, been gleaning a lot from them individually, and then sort of creating, I either weave in, their methods, or I kind of weave in different aspects of their methods into my own. So I kind of play around with it a bit.
Yeah. So I want to ask you just a couple questions about your personal practice, because you've been practicing or in the yoga world for 2 decades, right? And so what has the journey been of your self-practice or your daily practice? What does that mean to have a home practice or to have a daily practice? And what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I've always had a little bit of an uncomfortable relationship to the notion of daily practice, especially as like a yoga teacher and practitioner. You know, it's like we have to be really serious about our daily practice. And for many years, it's I would have to admit to myself that I didn't have a daily asana practice. Like, it was regular enough, obviously, to give me a lot of benefits. I was learning a lot from going to classes and really kind of soaking that up. And then I kind of made peace with the notion of, you know, we can get a little bit caught up in the idea that a self-practice is just about being on the mat and doing asana. And I started to recognize, especially as my studies deepened with yoga, was that because yoga is so much more than just being on the mat and doing an asana practice, it really was about how do you relate to the world around you? How do you relate to the people you come in contact with? You know, are you relating from a heart place? Are you connecting with people from a heart place? Are you acting with kindness? Are you, you know, being conscious and aware of like the times that you do lose your cool, or you're not, you know, that pleased with yourself? Like, you know, just cultivating self-awareness in those moments, those day-to-day moments.
And compassion, it sounds like.
Absolutely, yeah. And then I would say part of my, what I am committed to is just taking moments of my day to just, you know, whether it's sitting for 5, 10, 20 minutes, quietly contemplating, perhaps journaling. Like, there's some self-reflection that happens on a day-to-day basis. And one thing, especially as I've had this very nomadic life for the last 15, 20 years, is that I always have a little altar. So I have, you know, little pieces of, you know, could be stones, crystals that are often have been gifted to me by people along the way, and little pieces that are meaningful to me. And I always set that up and have a space in, whether it's a hotel room or a place that I'm living in, that it just is a outer reflection of kind of a sacred space within, and that's kind of a reminder. And I will light a candle or incense and just take a few moments to tune in. So that to me has always been a very important part of a self-practice.
I love everything you just shared. I feel like, especially as yoga teachers, there's a lot of projection onto us about what we should be doing in order to be worthy of the title of yoga teacher. And, you know, I have a lot of friends who, if they're going to teach, then they make sure that they practice for 90 minutes of asana before they go teach a 90-minute class, or else they're not worthy to teach somehow, or they're not qualified. So, and I also don't buy into that notion. So it's so wonderful to get this spectrum of perspectives on what that means, and how just even having that word practice or having a little travel altar can really create that sacred space for reflection and self-awareness in your life. So thank you for that. So this is the Pure Flow podcast, and flow is something that I'm fascinated and interested. And I'm wondering, you know, when you're not in flow, when you're faced with challenges, you know, you're now transitioning into a new offering, a new business, really, chances are you're tilling the soil and you're not in full flow all the time. So my question to you is, what does flow mean to you, and how do you come back to flow when you're not there?
It's an interesting question. It's one actually that I can find challenging, because to me it's very connected to creativity and you know, what flows through us naturally and organically. And I've always struggled a little bit with what comes naturally to me. Like, I'm not musically inclined. I don't tend to like have a sense of picking up paintbrush and painting. Like, there aren't any obvious tools where people just enter a state of flow where music's flowing through them, or they're painting or writing poetry or whatever. And I've always been a little bit envious of those people.
Sure.
So it's often been a bit of like, well, what is it that allows me to enter that kind of flow? And honestly, it's a bit of a challenge that I've been grappling with over the last kind of couple of years. And I think a big part of this transition for me right now is, how do I tune back into what comes naturally, creatively? How do I have more fun? You know, what lights me up? What can I just tune into that comes from joy rather than a sense of obligation? And I think, especially in this world of digital technology, and it's like we've entered this era of management. It's like we're managing everything. We're managing, our social media, our emails, our phones. It's like where our businesses, our lives are totally overmanaged. And when that happens, it crowds out the time for flow. And I sometimes reflect on, like, I'm sure every person, says, oh, the good old days, and reflects back on a time when things were a bit different. But I'm really glad that I had the experience before all of this, iPhone technology stuff, texting, and immediately being, available, that there was a place where we could intuitively just kind of like run into each other without having to, like, are you there now? Texting, it was like, oh, we just happened to kind of run into each other, and that to me is like, that's flow. And there's a real magic in that. So I guess I'm trying to reconnect to how can I, connect back into that magical flow, even though our lives are so kind of, managed by these devices. So that's my sense of it.
Yeah. Well, you and I, we shared Thailand, or the Bay, or Magic Bay as we call it, as one of our home bases. You've been coming and going from there for how long?
15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
True veteran.
Yeah, totally.
And that's one of the things that I love so much about living there, is that
exactly,
even with the rise in technology and everyone on their phones in the restaurants and things like this, there is still that magic flowing through, where you run into the person that you need to see, or you suddenly meet the right person at the right time. And
I was just thinking of Thailand, when I was describing this. It was like that so accentuated that experience of just at the right time in the right place, the right person would pop up. And that's not to say that none of this happens these days either. Of course it does. But we can sometimes be so distracted that we don't allow that kind of time and space for that magic to happen.
Well, and I think one of the reasons why that place in Thailand is so magical is just because it is so nature focused. I mean, it's that crystal quartz land. We're walking barefoot. The majestic ocean is right there. Yeah. It's like the nature is just our teacher constantly.
Absolutely.
It's so present.
Oh, I've cherished my time there, and still go back, as you know, regularly. And it's just like coming back to the mother.
There we go, back to that feminine essence.
Yeah.
So, moving forward, we know that Somah Journeys is your new project. And what are you working on? What are you bringing for the people? What are you hoping to create moving forward?
So I've been running in Peru. I've been running 100-hour immersions for the past 4 or 5 years. So we run that annually. I work with a young medicine woman. She holds the medicine container, exactly. Along with another elder, I consider him an elder, who holds the container of the Wachuma work. So we do that every year in Peru. So we have one coming up this June 19th to 29th. It's in the Sacred Valley. We have another one next February 1st to 10th.
also in Peru?
Also in Peru, same place, beautiful retreat center. They take care of us so well. So this is a really, really lovely, magical experience. And then I'm collaborating with the Ayurveda Center here in Ubud, Bali, with Dr. Sujata, who's a very well-established Ayurvedic doctor in her center. So we're collaborating on an Ayurveda and yoga retreat. It's 5 days. It's August 13th to 18th. And that, so people can sign up just as a course. It's a continuing ed course for teachers if they want to add hours, or it's just an immersion for people who want to learn a bit more about Ayurveda and yoga. I'll be bringing in a lot about the koshas and Yoga Nidra, and Dr. Sujata will bring in a lot of the Ayurvedic principles. And then increasingly I'm doing a lot of collaborations. So
it's the way.
Yeah. So one of my oldest, we both are old friends with Randall O'Leary, who's also been running his yoga trainings off of the Bay, and has actually also run them out of Pure Flow Yoga in Thailand. So I regularly collaborate with him on his 200-hour trainings, and we are also going to be collaborating for a 100-hour Yin and Yoga Nidra training in Thailand in September, so September 1st to 14th. So the focus will be Yin Yoga with Yoga Nidra as a tool of integration, and Chinese medicine principles. So there's 4 of us teaching on that training. And then next year we'll put together, we're in the process of putting together several programs. So 2 are going to be running out of the Yoga Barn. So April, Randall and I again are collaborating on a 100-hour immersion that will focus on prana, pranayama, and Yoga Nidra. And that runs April 17th to 27th. And then another very good friend of ours, Bex Tyrer, and I are collaborating in October next year, October 17th to 27th, and it's all about cycles and rhythms. Beautiful. So all the yogic practices, Yoga Nidra, nature-based practices that really help us kind of deepen into the wisdom of the cycles and rhythms of our, of life.
So when you think about a legacy that maybe you want to leave, once you do leave the body, is it around this cycles and?
I certainly at this point in my life, I'm passionate about this. What I see in life is that things can change quickly, and but the consistent thread through my life is that I'm really interested in helping people realign to the essence of who they are, who they came into this world to be. And for some that might be a yoga teacher, for some it might be something completely different. But we have to get clear within our, our heart, our deepest dharma, like what our purpose is. And when we live our purpose, we care about ourselves, we care about those around us, we care about our planet. And so for me, really, it's about how it's delivering tools to people to help them come into alignment with what their deepest purpose is. And that to me then ripples out into life and the relationships that we have with each other, and recognize our interconnection with each other. And that to me is the essence of what I do.
Oh, I love it. It's perfect. So for those of the listeners who won't necessarily be able to join in Thailand, Peru, or Bali next year, how can they access your wisdom? What do you have online that they can learn from or follow?
So as this is a time of transition, we're still building a lot of that, but the direction we're headed in, I obviously have a website, which is Somah with an H, journeys.net. And there at the moment is a free download of a Yoga Nidra on there that combines a bit of the Richard Miller approach, and then my own approach to conveying a teaching that came through the medicine wheel teachings from an elder that I've had the privilege to sit with over the last few years from the Blackfeet people. So there's a free download there, and increasingly we're going to be adding more nidras that people can download, and then we're looking at some online content over the time to come. So all of this is still in process, but that's where it's headed.
Beautiful. And we'll include all of the links in the show notes so people can access your free download.
Great.
Is there anywhere else that we can look for you? somahjourneys.com, and do you have an Instagram?
It's somahjourneys.net.
.net, pardon me.
Yeah, Instagram, Somah Journeys, and Facebook, Somah Journeys. And so it's transition. We have a lot going with School of Sacred Arts, so there's still a School of Sacred Arts website, and so there's still a lot of information contained about what I have done up until this point, and sort of,
Wonderful. It has been such a pleasure to journey with you on this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us, and blessings on your transition.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening and tuning into our podcast today. I really hope that you got a lot from it and feel really inspired and uplifted. Please help us help you by spreading the love. Tell a friend, leave us a 5-star review, and make sure to sign up to our love letter at pureflow.yoga to stay connected with the community and receive our free weekly love and inspirations, as well as be the first to know about our upcoming blog and podcast episodes. We're also going to share with you special deals on our Thailand yoga retreats that we just don't share anywhere else. And if you want to help support these efforts, which it takes a lot of time and love and energy to spread the love in this way, and we want to keep doing this for you. So please consider sharing a monthly donation, a contribution, and you can find that at pureflow.yoga/podcast. So hope you have a really beautiful day, a really beautiful week. Feel free to reach out anytime, and sending you so much love.